For those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, you know that I probably was gushing about this a little bit yesterday, but our next session is our startup story session. And we came across Red Envelope Stories and Michelle Liu about a month ago, and she agreed to join us today. And she has a fantastic platform. So I'm going to just let her take it away. She is being interviewed by Ana Gonzalez from the Publix Radio. And Ana and Michelle, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, thank you everyone for having us. My name is Michelle. I'm a student at Brown, and I'm a co-founder of the newsletter Red Envelope Stories. And what we're really trying to do is highlight the narratives of the AAPI community through bite-sized stories told directly from the community. And what we've been doing is collecting stories, curating them, and publishing them through this newsletter. And Anna and I actually know each other through our work at the Publix Radio, where we develop stories and shows for Mosaic Stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Ana Gonzalez. Can you hear me? Is everything good? We good? All right, great. My name is Ana Gonzalez. I'm the host and producer of Mosaic, which is a podcast about immigrant stories, experiences from the Publix Radio. And Michelle is actually the intern for our show, and she is a stellar intern. I can't, oh my goodness, I love Michelle. I'm gonna be very sad when she graduates, but we got another year with her. And so Michelle, like early on, was like, do you know about this thing that I made? It's called Red Envelope Stories. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll check it out. And then when I did, finally, I was like, oh my gosh, you put like a full-time undergraduate student put together this amazing website called Red Envelope Stories. So I just want to know, Michelle, where did the idea for Red Envelope Stories come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've always been a writer, so I love hearing stories, especially from other people. And what inspired Red Envelope Stories are these conversations I had with my Asian American friends, where we often grappled with parts of our identity, but we couldn't put a word, like we couldn't put a finger to it. And we wanted to verbalize and express what we were feeling, these smaller microaggressions that we weren't really sure were often times of racism or inferiority. And I think by bringing to light these stories on a platform, you can really sort of reflect upon your own experiences and connect with others and be like, hey, oh wow, I did experience something like that. And now I have like the words to understand what I'm going through, or know that someone out there is also kind of grappling with the same qualms.
Do you have an example, like a story maybe that somebody submitted that you were like, oh yeah, I experienced that too, and I finally feel like it was real and it was bad and I'm now dealing with it?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the Asian experience is that you occupy a very tenuous position in this racial hierarchy. So you're not, at the bottom of the racial totem pole, but you're not white at the same time. So you're kind of grappling with this, secondary whiteness, I would say, and in sociology. And so, for example, one of the stories that really stood out to me was one about persimmons. And this writer, she was saying, my grandma would always feed us persimmons, and my white friends would think, what is this? And I would feel like they were judging me. And I kind of had a similar experience when my mom would always microwave like all these like drinks, like juices, milks, water. And then one time, these girls in my Girl Scout troop, they came over and they were like, where's the cold water? Why do you drink only hot water? It might have just been like a mom thing, but it's these experiences that you can't really pinpoint exactly to your Asian identity. More so, like you're wondering, is there just something wrong with me? And you can't really tie it back to your Asian identity. And I think that's what's really interesting about these stories, that you can relate to these more nuanced experiences. You're like, oh wow, maybe it's not just something with me, maybe it's something with the community. And where we all like fall on this like spectrum.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And something that is striking about Red Envelope Stories to me, especially right now, the past year plus of like a surge in anti-Asian hate crimes, we're seeing violence, we're seeing anti-Asian rhetoric really just being allowed to occupy space more broadly. And you see a lot of news outlets in response trying to cover, like, what does it mean to be Asian American? What is this like to be, discriminated against? And something that Red Envelope Stories does is it takes on this big world of, and this it's like a David and Goliath situation, right? Where you're this small little website. It's like just the beginning of really of like an ownership of these stories and producing the stories yourself. So what are your plans for the future of Red Envelope Stories and how you can develop that?
Yeah, I think right now we have been gathering these stories, but we really want to share them in a more accessible format. So right now they're very short, but not everyone reads. Not everyone enjoys the reading format these days, honestly. They're very short. They're 150 words, like I said, but we're thinking of maybe transitioning into maybe more multimedia. So recently I was on a podcast, Modern Minorities, where we had the authors record the story. So bringing a new dimension in life to these, their narratives. And we're thinking maybe working with some artists to illustrate some of these concepts and depict the ideas presented in the stories. And I think moving forward, it would honestly be such a dream come true, or like so incredible to see, an exhibition of these stories in some way, where maybe to connect with Providence's past Chinatown to bring these stories to a bigger audience. And right now we're really trying to navigate this transition in that, hey, should we be focusing more on these curated stories, or does another format work better in today's age?
Absolutely. And I'm curious about, first of all, you're a full-time undergrad student at Brown University, and then you also work in consulting, and you are the intern for Mosaic at the Public Radio, and you do that job. Like, I can verify, we got our meetings, we do our things. How do you balance this project, which is unpaid, right? Like, you're just doing it out of the love and the passion to do it, with all of your other very high demand things that you do?
I think something that drives me isn't like any external factors, but something more internally, in that I love writing, I love storytelling. So I've read so many books since coming back home, and I want to hear what people have to say. So I think this is more internally driven, like intrinsically. And to be completely transparent, it's sort of like hard when someone isn't telling you to do these things. So it's not like in consulting where your manager might just be like, oh, finish this Excel spreadsheet, where you're in school and you have to finish a test. You're really driving the project on your own, and there's no answer because there's so many possibilities where your startup could go. I think that's what's the hardest part to grapple with, like the complete autonomy you have over the project. So like the sort of that paradoxical nature of startups in general. You could do everything, but that's sort of that all those possibilities seem overwhelming at times. So what I've been doing really is understanding what can keep me going and keep me passionate about the things I do, and whether I need breaks from things to really reflect and see how I can make the projects even better.
I see that. Yeah, I definitely see your the self-driven part of this, and how it could be a relief almost from having somebody tell you what to do, and then being able to manage your time. But then, yeah, those possibilities could kind of be intimidating. You need to take a step back sometimes to get some perspective. Mm-hmm. Speaking of like possibilities, Red Envelope Stories is free. Do you ever have a plan to monetize it or turn it into some sort of business?
Yeah, I was actually on a phone call with Jerry Wan from Dear Asian Americans, which is another podcast, and he was really telling me that oftentimes community work is like seen as, obligatory, that it has to be volunteer or nonprofit, and that's what's even harder about amplifying marginalized voices, and that sometimes these people who work in these fields, creators, don't get paid. And honestly, until I had that conversation with Jerry, I didn't think that like it felt kind of wrong to raise these voices, but who else is going to do that work? And how can you sustain yourself if that's what you want to do for a full-time living? So right now, if I were to pursue red envelope stories seriously, I would consider ways to get grants, like art grants or story grants, or maybe work with a corporation to boost their image. And those are some ways I can think of monetizing our brand, our company, our organization, and ultimately maybe publishing these stories in some way. It would obviously require some ethos or credibility from like us. So getting some media coverage is always great. So I honestly didn't even think about it until I talked to Jerry. It was always something that I saw as like voluntary, you needed to do, just as a human being, but to monetize it obviously is an added incentive.
Do you have any plans to maybe study this in like a graduate program, or like, does this influence your studies at all?
Yeah, so at Brown, I study sociology and statistics, and I love how integrated they are. Sociology, especially studies of race, have been super interesting to me. So I think maybe after a few years of corporate work or consulting, I want to return to college or university and pursue a PhD, maybe in sociology. And I think it's super interesting that I have the privilege to reflect upon my identity and share others' narratives as well.
And finally, last question, where can people find your stuff? Like, this is the time to drop all your links. And I'll share one thing, that Mosaic is featuring. There's going to be a season 3 of Mosaic coming out this summer. That's more conversational, and we are featuring a few red envelope stories in an episode, including an essay written by Michelle. So that's going to be awesome. But yeah, Michelle, where can everyone find your stuff?
Yeah, so it's redenvelopestories.net, where you can see some of our past stories and subscribe. There's literally nothing you have to do to subscribe except for put in your email address, and we won't spam you. It's just once a week, or for now, even like there's no other monetary associations, don't worry. And if you have any questions, you can always email redenvelopestories@gmail.com. And our Instagram isn't as active, but you can still follow us there at Red Envelope Stories. And feel free to reach out with any questions, any suggestions, any opportunities. We are super happy to talk with you guys and give you the time of day to express whatever you're feeling.
Cool. Well, thanks, Michelle. That's all I have. Anything else that you want to share?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for interviewing me, Ana. You're the best boss I've
You're the
had.
best. Well, it's been a pleasure. It was really great. Thanks to Amy and Toonie for having both of us on. This was really fun.